My name is Ben Burgis. I am the author of Give Them an Argument, Logic for the Left, forthcoming in just a couple months from Zero Books. And today I want to talk about a video by Ben Shapiro about the political preferences of American Jews. This was a request on Twitter from Evan Dokos, asked if I could do a response to this video. And I am going to get there, but first I can't not talk about this amazing tweet from Max Boot, which was just a few days ago, and it's too on point for things that I've been talking about in these videos for me not to talk about. So here's what Max Boot said. He said this about Congresswoman Ilhan Omar righteously grilling war criminal Elliot Abrams about his involvement in the Reagan administration's backing of dirty wars in El Salvador and Guatemala and other places around Latin America. Here's what Elliot Abrams has to say about this whole incident. Disgraceful ad hominem attack by Ilhan Omar on my counsel for foreign relations colleague Elliot Abrams. She doesn't seem to realize he is a leading advocate of human rights and democracy, not a promoter of genocide. More evidence of the loony left I caution Democrats about. All right, well, first of all, on the factual issue, if your instinct when you hear that is, okay, well, genocide is probably a bridge too far, right? That's probably just verbal inflation. You know, the Reagan administration might have been up to a lot of bad stuff in Latin America, but, you know, surely this doesn't rise to the level of genocide. Well, a lot of UN human rights experts would disagree with you there. And in fact, a Guatemalan court did rule at one point that the systematic massacres of indigenous people engaged in by the death squads backed by Reagan and Elliot Abrams in Guatemala did in fact meet the legal definition of genocide. So what Ilhan Omar said was absolutely true. But here's the thing, even if it wasn't, it would have nothing to do with the ad hominem fallacy. You're not committing a logical fallacy when you accuse somebody of genocide. You might be saying something true, you might be saying something false, depending on the specifics, but either way, it's not a logical fallacy. The ad hominem fallacy is the mistaken reasoning we make when we take negative claims about someone making an argument as a reason to reject the conclusion or disregard the argument. Just as the appeal to authority fallacy is the logical mistake that we make when we take irrelevant positive claims about the person making an argument as a reason to believe the argument, to believe the conclusion, or accept that this argument is a good one. Okay, so before Ilhan Omar was in the news for correctly telling somebody who committed war crimes that they committed war crimes, she was in the news just a few days prior because the right wing and a lot of worthless neoliberal corporate Democrats like Chelsea Clinton were falsely and absurdly accusing her of anti-Semitism. The reason they accused her of anti-Semitism was that she made the banally true observation that big money lobbying on behalf of Israel influences U.S. policy with regard to Israel, just like big money lobbying on behalf of all sorts of other things influences policy about those. Now, if you want to really break down Congresswoman Omar's comment to find something to criticize, and you're going to really take her quotation of a song lyric super literally, said it's all about the Benjamins. Of course, it's not all about the Benjamins. There are a lot of larger reasons, strategic reasons, why the United States, as an imperial actor in the Middle East, finds it useful to have Israel as its client state. Just like there are lots of reasons besides NRA lobbying and pro-gun donors why the United States has the gun laws that it does. But in either case, it's quite a stretch to say that this isn't a major factor, much less to smear the Congresswoman as an anti-Semite for pointing it out. All right, so first I want to watch just a couple minutes of Ben Shapiro's video about that before I talk about the Ben Shapiro video that I was asked to talk about for this week.
So Ilhan Omar tweeted out, quote, "It's all about the Benjamins, baby," with a little music symbol. Now, as a Jew, one of the oft-used anti-Semitic tropes, I mean, this has been true for thousands of years, is that the Jews control the monetary systems with their shekels, that the Jews are an evil, nefarious force behind world events spreading around money, and that the reason that people support the Jews is because they've been corrupted by the Jew gold. It's been the Jew gold behind Republican support for the state of Israel, which, of course, is a complete lie. The vast majority of Americans support Israel and support Jews because they're not anti-Semitic and because they recognize that Israel is fighting against some of the worst people on planet Earth. And it isn't really a hard choice when you have a choice between democratic country that respects individual rights and evil Islamist dictatorship that tries to murder civilians in their bed, right? Not a hard choice for most Americans. Very hard choice for a lot of Democrats, apparently. Ilhan Omar, though, suggests that the reason Republicans support Israel is because they're being paid off by the Jew gold.
All right, so let's talk about that. It's obviously easy and tempting, and I'm obviously going to give in to temptation here and do it. It's very tempting to slam Shapiro for the rank and hilarious hypocrisy involved when he does the identitarian thing. Speaking as a Jew, take my word for it that this is anti-Semitic, which, of course, is exactly the kind of move that Shapiro would be the first to dismiss in any other context. His professional brand is, to a great degree, all about rejecting that kind of left identitarianism where somebody would say, speaking as a woman, speaking as a black man, speaking as a Palestinian, such and such is sexist, racist, etc. He wouldn't accept that from anybody else, and we shouldn't accept it from him. That just because you're a member of a given identity category, that means that you can't be making a bad argument about whether something falls into one of these categories. All right, put that aside. Also, notice that he says most Americans support Israel. There's a really important equivocation going on there. What does it mean to support Israel? Now, my position as a radical socialist, card-carrying member of DSA, someone who wants a form of socialism that, would go beyond, what DSA is talking about right now. My position is, like most other people who would fit into what I just said, that we want Israel to be transformed into a single, secular, multi-ethnic democratic state with completely equal rights for Israeli Jews, for Palestinians on both sides of the Green Line, for guest workers, for everybody else. That instead of the unacceptable status quo or a partition arrangement that would preserve a lot of bad elements of the status quo while ameliorating others, we would prefer a singular, secular, democratic state, preferably a singular, secular, democratic, socialist republic. Okay, if what he means by pro-Israel is that they're not talking about that most Americans don't support what I just said, fair enough. Most Americans are, in that sense, pro-Israel. But normally, in most contexts, Ben Shapiro wouldn't say all it takes to be pro-Israel is not to support a radical, secular, democratic one-state solution. In most contexts, Ben Shapiro would say that in order to be pro-Israel, you must accept Israel's right to defend itself, which usually means the right to defend itself against unarmed civilians by massacring them. You have to accept Israel's right to exist as a Jewish state, which means even if that means denying millions of refugees their basic legal and moral right to return to their homes or to the homes of their parents or grandparents, that were expelled from. And certainly, Going beyond even those positions, Ben Shapiro in most contexts would say that you're not pro-Israel if you think that the United States should play a more neutral role as a broker in a peace process, or should pressure Israel to make concessions to the Palestinians for the sake of some sort of two-state solution even. Shapiro would normally call that very anti-Israel. Certainly Shapiro would say you're anti-Israel if you support the Iran deal. In fact, we're going to see him say just that in just a minute. So, are most Americans pro-Israel in the sense that they're somewhere to the right of my position, DSA's position, Noam Chomsky's position? Sure. Are most Americans anywhere even close to Ben Shapiro's position? No. Most Americans are miles to the left of Ben Shapiro's position. And in fact, most American Jews are miles to the left of Ben Shapiro's position on Israel-Palestine, which is going to be the subject of the second video. Before we start that, though, I want to point out one thing quickly, because this is going to be what I'm going to be pointing out again and again about the second video, which is that at the end of this video, Shapiro is engaged in a pretty blatant instance of the false dilemma fallacy. This is more colloquially known as setting up a false dichotomy. So, Shapiro says it's not a hard choice between, and then he lists what he artificially limits the choices to be. So, either you support Israel, which he describes in glowingly inaccurate terms, as if it were honoring the democratic rights of everybody, which is total nonsense. In the Palestinians who were still living in the on the Israeli side of the Green Line after the Nakba, take two. Palestinians who are still living within Israel proper after the mass expulsion of other Palestinian civilians in 1948 have had openly second-class status in lots of ways since then, more so now than ever after the nation-state law. Palestinians on the other side of the Green Line have been kept for the last 52 years as stateless and rightless, permanent underclass of people who aren't allowed their own state, aren't allowed to vote in elections in the Israeli state, and are routinely denied basic legal and human rights. So his depiction there is absurd. If you need convincing about that, go read some Chomsky. But really, his position there is absurd. And of course, he's painting Hamas in the most demonized possible way. And obviously, as a secular socialist, I have a zillion criticisms of Hamas. That's a very reactionary, religious fundamentalist, in many ways, very right-wing formation. But the way that he's depicting, Israeli light and Gazan darkness is pretty simplistic. It's pretty juvenile, and it's pretty far from reality. More importantly, though, why are those the only options? Either you are all on board with this apartheid state denying people basic legal and human rights, or you support Hamas. Why isn't it an option to have the position that I just laid out, that Palestinians and all other groups should be given full individual rights, and everybody, Muslims, Christians, Jews, different, Druze, different subgroup, cultural groups, within the Palestinian Arab population, that everybody has individual rights and full cultural rights within a singular, secular, democratic state. Why isn't that an option? For that matter, why isn't it one of his options on that list that the United States should be a more neutral broker in some sort of peace process to establish a two-state solution? Even that is to the left of Shapiro's position, and even that is totally left out of his false dichotomy. So, we're going to watch this other video. This is an older video, but as far as I know, Shapiro has never said, oh, I was wrong to say these things. As far as I know, the simplistic and ridiculous things that he says in this video are still the simplistic and ridiculous things he believes. And I'm just going to pause it a few times to point out the way that he's setting up these false dilemmas. And then I'm going to make one larger point about it at the other end of the video. All right, let's watch.
Hi, I'm Ben Shapiro, and this is Reality Check. In 2008, American Jews voted overwhelmingly for Barack Obama. Even though Obama had spent large segments of his prior life hobnobbing with vicious anti-Semites like Jeremiah Wright and Rashid Khalidi, even though he had staffed his campaign with anti-Semites ranging from Zbigniew Brzezinski to Robert Malley, Jews turned out in droves for him. Sarah Silverman harangued young Jews into telling their grandparents that they were racist if they didn't vote for Barack Obama. Jeffrey Goldberg, President Obama's designated court Jew, a role he has never relinquished, informed Jews that they were racist if they feared Obama's positions on Israel. American Jews voted 78% for Barack Obama in 2008. After he was elected, Obama proceeded to undermine Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. He forced Netanyahu to humiliate himself before thugs like the Turkish government, publicly condemn Israel's defense of itself during the Gaza war against Hamas while funding the Hamas unity government, repeatedly leak vital national security information that would have allowed Israel to strike Iran, and sign a deal with Iran that essentially foreclosed any possibility of Western attempts to stop Iran from going nuclear. And so American Jews voted 69% for Barack Obama in 2012. The question I'm most often asked, thanks to my kippah, is why Jews vote leftist. The answer is simple. The vast majority of Jews don't care about Judaism or Israel. They care about secular leftism, which is their actual religion.
Either you care about Judaism or Israel, and you draw Shapiro-like conclusions from your caring about those things, or you don't care at all about either Judaism or Israel. Really? Really, Ben? Those are the options? Let's keep watching.
And the polls show this. American Jews are the least religious group in America. Only 41% say that their religion is important to them in their daily life, according to a December 2012 Gallup poll. Only 34% said they attend religious services at least monthly, compared with 65% of Jews who said they attended religious services seldom or never. 22% of Jews say they have no religion. According to an October 2013 Pew poll, just 38% of Jews say their Jewish identity has anything to do with Judaism at all. Just 10% of Jews identify as Orthodox, people who consider themselves fulfilling the commandments of the Torah.
Once again, either you're Orthodox or you don't care about the commandments of the Torah. One fact that Ben conveniently omits is that the vast majority of religiously affiliated American Jews are affiliated with non-Orthodox denominations. The vast majority of Jews who, whether it's seldom or frequently, go to some sort of synagogue are going to a non-Orthodox synagogue, which is also going to be relevant to the political point because conservative, reform, and reconstructionist denominations of Judaism do tilt, at least somewhat, not as much as people with political positions like mine might want, but they do tilt at least somewhat to the left of the average position of Orthodox Jews on all of the issues that Ben is talking about. Let's keep watching.
As for Israel, just 30% of Jews say they are very attached to Israel. Only 43% of Jews have ever been to Israel. And here's an amazing statistic. Just 40% of Jews believe that God gave Israel to the Jewish people. 27% say God didn't. Another 5% said they didn't know. And 28% said they didn't even believe in God. So, what does being Jewish actually mean to most Jews? Again, according to that Pew poll, 73% of Jews said it was about remembering the Holocaust. It isn't. Just 19% said it was about observing Jewish law. Only 28% said it was about being part of a Jewish community. Jews, in other words, are not religious. They are secular leftists who don't want to be labeled white people because they like being diverse and being able to enjoy the in-jokes at Woody Allen films.
All right, those are the options. Either you're a super-duper Zionist, or you are a Orthodox Jewish religious fundamentalist, or you're kind of pretending at best to care about this cultural identity, because you like Woody Allen movies, or as a sneaky leftist, you like to be able to say that you're a member of a minority. Now, among the many options that he's not considering there are, one, that there could be Jews who care about Israel, who are Zionists of some sort, but are relatively liberal Zionists, who think that it's in Israel's long-term self-interest to have a less belligerent policy towards its Palestinian subject population and its neighbors. Lots of people believe that. Real debate within Zionism. I'm not a Zionist of any kind, but I just want to point out, as a matter of logic here, that it's totally excluded from the options that Ben Shapiro is setting up here. Also, maybe besides, liking to think of yourself as a member of a minority, or liking Woody Allen movies, could it be that you actually do care about your fellow Jews, that you do have a sense of community attachment, but that you think as a minority group, your best bet is to support something to the left of the increasingly white nationalist-friendly GOP? Is that an option? Again, Shapiro doesn't consider it. Let's keep going.
So, why is it a surprise that most Jews vote leftist? Most Jews aren't Jewish in any real sense, beyond ethnic identification. They have nothing to do with Torah, the 5 books of Moses. They have nothing to do with the ethical system posited by biblical Judaism. They have nothing to do with the mitzvot, the commandments.
All right, one more time. The ethical system postulated by biblical Judaism. Well, there is a long tradition of religious leftists in the Jewish community, from Abraham Joshua Heschel, who marched with Martin Luther King in Selma, who spoke out in eloquent terms against America's quasi-genocidal war in Vietnam. There is a long history from Heschel going up to people who are, contributors to Tikkun magazine, Rabbi Michael Lerner, people like that, of rabbis and Jewish theologians who've drawn moral and political conclusions from the Jewish tradition miles and miles to the left of Ben Shapiro, but the only options he's willing to consider are that you care about the ethical teachings of the Jewish tradition, or that you just don't care about any of that. That you're not really Jewish in any way. Let's keep watching.
They have nothing to do with Israel. Polling Jews on their politics is like polling anyone born Catholic on their politics. You're going to skew far to the left by including lapsed Catholics.
Is the only reason why the political preferences of Catholics and Poles skew to the left of the political preferences of the kinds of Catholics that Ben Shapiro hangs out with, that the polls include lapsed Catholics? I don't think so. I would suggest that Ben Shapiro might benefit from Googling the phrase liberation theology. Let's keep watching.
And most Jews are lapsed Jews, or never knew anything in the first place Jews. The Torah is not a left-wing document. It opposes abortion. It opposes same-sex marriage. It does not believe in a grand welfare system, but in private charity.
The Torah does not believe in abortion and same-sex marriage in a welfare state. The last one, of course, is wildly misleading. It's not like the first two. The Torah doesn't say anything one way or the other about a welfare state. The idea of redistributive taxation is certainly not condemned, but of course, this was written to give the laws of a Bronze Age theocracy. The idea of a welfare state was well in the future. Saying that the Torah is not on board with the idea of a welfare state is like saying that the Torah is not, is against quantum physics because quantum physics are not mentioned therein. All right. How about same-sex marriage, working backwards? Well, yes. It's true that there is stuff on that subject in the Torah that's very not left-friendly. But Shapiro is being conveniently vague. He goes to, there's nothing, the marriage in there is just for a man and a woman. Well, what it actually says is that homosexuals should be executed which even Ben Shapiro doesn't think. This is an important point. Let's keep going. Abortion, also not mentioned one way or the other. In fact, what is mentioned in the Torah is in the listing of crimes and punishments, there's a crime of attacking a pregnant woman and causing a miscarriage, and the punishment for that is considerably less than the punishment for murder, which logically does imply that the authors of these texts didn't consider that to be murder, that they didn't consider a fetus to have the same moral status as a person. Interesting. So, to be clear, I think that any attempt to extrapolate from any of these ancient religious texts, whether it be the Torah or the Upanishads or whatever, to contemporary political debates is going to involve a lot of stretching, a lot of picking and choosing. As an atheist, I have no interest whatsoever in trying to adjudicate what the correct political interpretation of Judaism is. But it's the fact that you're going to have to ignore some stuff that doesn't fit with your agenda, or more charitably, that you're going to have to reinterpret a lot of stuff that doesn't seem to fit with your agenda, in order to make the Torah fit with any contemporary political program. Ben Shapiro's politics, my politics, Michael Lerner's politics, anyone's politics, is itself the point that he's only considering his picking and choosing or none as the only options. One more time, Ben is engaged in a false dilemma. All right, let's finish up the video.
It dictates belief that Israel was promised to the Jews and that the Jews have a responsibility to live ethically according to a very specific set of behavioral guidelines. Judaism is conservative in the modern parlance. Those who pretend to back both Judaism and left-wing values are betraying Torah Judaism, which is why while Jews vote 3-1 for Democrats, Orthodox Jews vote nearly 2-1 for Republicans. Now, there are older Jews who vote leftist because they remember the bad old days of country club Republicans who rejected them from the golf course, and they don't realize that things have changed pretty dramatically. There are older Jews who vote leftist because they remember the legacy of European Christianity that preyed on Jews for centuries, and they don't realize that American Christians are Jews' best friends, not the American left that stands by President Obama. But, by and large, most Jews vote leftist because they are upper, middle-class agnostics with above-average levels of postgraduate education who believe that religion is a great ill, that biblical morality is intolerant and vicious, and that Judaism itself is passé. So, bottom line, Jews who care about actual Judaism don't vote leftist, and those who prioritize leftism don't vote Jewish. Please subscribe to our YouTube.
All right. He committed the false dilemma fallacy about 5 more times in that last couple of minutes. I'm not going to break down all of them, but I think at this point in the video, you should be able to do that. I'm gonna leave that as an exercise for the class. But here's a larger point. Why does Ben Shapiro argue like this? Why is it that instead of openly admitting, hey, there are American Jews who have legitimate concerns about the white nationalist adjacent politics of the contemporary Republican Party, and I would make a different judgment, but I understand where they're coming from, and here's why I think that they're wrong, right? Acknowledge the real position and argue against it, instead of saying, there are liberal Zionists who think that Israel would be better served by making peace. I disagree. Here's why. Let's have an argument about it. Instead of saying there are people to the left of that who aren't anti-Semites, who in many cases are Jewish, who want full religious, cultural, and individual rights for everybody who don't support Israel in any sense, but here's why I think that they're mistaken. He doesn't do any of those things. He always artificially limits it, right? You either support Netanyahu or you support Hamas. No other options. And it sure seems to be that the simplest, most obvious explanation of why he argues this way is that he's not confident enough in his ideas to have an intellectually honest exchange with those who disagree. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he can reach deep within himself and actually honestly critique people without caricaturing their views and setting up these juvenile false dichotomies. So, please, Ben, if you're listening, do better.
Thanks for watching this Zero Books video. If you enjoyed it, subscribe to this channel and click on the notifications bell so that you'll be alerted whenever we release a new video. You should also consider supporting us on Patreon. Our patrons get access to our Inside Zero Books podcast every week and can get access to the Zero Books Book Club and help us to continue making online content from the left.